Hello, everyone. I welcome everyone to my lesson. So today we'll discuss the methods of measuring inflation in terms of precise quantitative methods available for calculation the inflation rate. If you remember the previous lesson, we discussed with you inflation in terms of causes of inflation. Then we discussed how can we measure the inflation rates and the types of inflation. So perhaps we'll go back again to the types of inflation because we discussed with you the different kinds of inflation in terms of rate of inflation. So in terms of rate of inflation, we have to recognize different types of inflation, like creeping inflation, where the inflation rate fluctuates between 2 and 5%. Then we discuss with you the running or galloping inflation, when the inflation rate may exceed 10% and fluctuates normally average between 20% and 200%. Then we turn to hyperinflation. The hyperinflation is extraordinary situation in national economy when the price level, the average annual price level, increases more than 1,000%. But anyway, I would like to clarify precise the methods of measuring inflation. As I mentioned before in my previous lesson, we can do this by using price indexes. So I would like to remind you that normally inflation rate is the ratio of difference between price level for current year and the same price index for the base year divided by the price index of base year, and the ratio we have to multiply by 100%. But the question is, how can we do that in details? Can we use the different price indexes? And how many different types of price indexes we can use for counting the inflation rate? Normally, we have two approaches for measuring inflation. We can do this in terms of price index number, so-called PIN, and there we have two different tools. We can do this in terms of CPI, Consumer Price Index, and in terms of WPI, so-called Wholesale Price Index, or sometimes the economists call this Producer's Price Index, PPI. And the second method is calculating the inflation rate in terms of GDP deflator. Now go on. So how can we do that more precise? Okay, so firstly, let's clarify what we imply when we say price index. So if you remember, we discussed this when we started to explain the differences between nominal and real GDP. So to calculate this, we need to understand what is the market basket. So market basket is number of goods that are representative of economy and they are put together. The cost of this basket we have to compare over time, and the result is price index. CPI, Consumer Price Index. So what we can do by using the Consumer Price Index, Consumer price index normally allows to measure all changes in the price level of market basket that consist of different consumer goods and services purchased by households, where sometimes we can use the consumer goods and services purchased by average urban customer. The annual percentage change in CPI we can use to measure the inflation rate. So, we can discuss many different theoretical approaches, but by me, the best way to understand the real content of this economic approach is to follow an example. So you can see an example. This is the hypothetical market basket, and you see the different years. Actually, I decided to use the years hypothetically, randomly chosen. That's why you can see the product, different products, 3 types of products. For example, the movie tickets, popcorn, and soda. And for every year, you see the different quantities and respective prices of every item. Say, for 2006, you see 2006 statistics, and its quantity 12, 6, 10. The prices $8, $4, and $2.50. Then the next year, 2007, again, we see the different quantities and the change in price. The next 2008 statistics, the quantity, and by the way, in some products, you may observe increase in quantity purchased, and in some of them, decrease, but the prices, unfortunately, you'll see strict increase in the prices of all goods in our hypothetical market basket. So, how many different steps we have to pass in order to calculate the inflation rate in right way? The first, we have to calculate CPI by following different steps. Firstly, we need to identify what year will be the base year. Suppose that the base year for our calculations is 2006. So quantities purchased in next years, 2007 and 2008, are irrelevant because we are assuming that household buys the same market basket of goods every month. So first step, we need to calculate all costs of our hypothetical purchaser on the base year. It means the expenditures for 2006. So what we need to count the expenditures? Of course, we need to multiply the quantity of goods purchased by respective prices. Say, for movie tickets, it's the number of tickets, 12, multiplied by price of one ticket, $8. The same we do for popcorn and soda. So very simple, you can do this very easily yourself. And the simple calculations allow us to count the total amount of expenditures on base year. It's about $145, and the costs of the same market basket in the next 2 years, 2008 and 2007, respectively. Look, you see the formula, hypothetical formula. So the price of every respective year, you have to multiply by quantities. But the quantities you use, instead of quantities, you have to use the quantities for the base year. It means 2006. That's why we multiply the new price of movie tickets, that's $10, by the 2006 year quantity. and the new price of popcorn by 2006 quantity 6, and the same we do for salt. So total number of dollars spent for 2007 market basket in terms of quantities of base year is $180. The same we do for 2008 year prices. Look, now the movie tickets became more expensive. That's $12 per unit. Popcorn as well is $5.50. And the soda also $3.50. But the quantities we use the same. The quantities of base year. And I would like to remind you, the base year is 2006 quantities. So now we go to the immediate calculation of Consumer Price Index, CPI. So that's the CPI formula. Look, expenditures or money spent on market basket in current year, we need to divide by expenditures on the same market basket, but in terms of the prices of base year, and result multiplied by 100%. Look, you can see the different approaches, but the meaning of this formula is the same. So expenditures in current year, that's the same like cost of market basket in current year. Expenditures in base year, it means the same like the cost of market basket in the base year. But how to calculate the CPI for the base year for 2006? That's very easy because you need strictly follow the formula. I mean this one. Look, nothing changes actually. We need to substitute instead of the formula the given data for 2006. Look, CPI for 2006 is cost of market basket of this year, I mean 2006, divided by the cost of basket of the same year, because the current year and the base year prices are the same for 2006. And that's why obvious that the CPI for base year is always 100. Now we turn to the calculation of respective consumer price indexes for 2 years, 2007 and 2008. Look, what do we need to do? Again, we strictly follow the formula. So to find the CPI for 2007, we need to divide costs or expenditures of market basket for 2007 by the costs or expenditures of market basket base 2006 year, and the result multiplied by 100%. So the previous calculations allow us to substitute the data into the formula, and we divide the $180, that is the cost of market basket for year 2007, divide by the expenditures of the same market basket for base year 2006, and that is $145, and result multiplied by 100. So these simple calculations allow us to find the 124.14 CPI, Consumer Price Index, for year 2007. The same procedure we have to repeat, I mean the same calculations we have to carry out for Consumer Price Index for year 2008. And obviously, we can calculate, that's the not so hard calculations. And finally, the index, the value of index for 2008 is 146.21. Okay. Now, we have to start to calculate the inflation rate, because the target of the lesson is to show what we have to do very clearly and consequently calculate the inflation rate in terms of consumer price index. So now we have to go back to the inflation rate formula when we need to find the difference between the value of consumer price index for current year. In formula, we denote this like new value, and take away from this the value of consumer price index for base year. This one we denote like old value, and divide the difference by old value. It means by price index in terms of base year, and finally the result multiply by 100%. So the result of these calculations will be the inflation rate in terms of consumer price index. Okay, because we have 3 years. We have 2006, 2007, and 2008. That's, by the way, I would like to repeat once more. That's a hypothetical example. So inflation rate for 2006 and 2007, we can calculate by substituting the respective values into general formula. You can see this in terms of consumer price index, and then in terms of quantitative values on respective consumer price indexes. Look, inflation rate for 2006 and 7, that's the difference in consumer price indexes for 2007 and 2006. And then we divide by the base year consumer price index. In our example, that's 2006 year indicator, and result multiplied by 100%. So 124.14, take away 100. I would like to remind you that for the base year, the consumer price index is always 100. That's why we take away 100. 124.14 take away 100 and divide by 100. Count this ratio and result multiply by 100%. So approximately the inflation rate is about 24%. Because the number, the digit on the first decimal place is less than 5. We cannot round up this. That's why we have to follow the number about 24% inflation rate. Then we can continue this process and calculate the respective inflation rate for the next years, in 2007 and 2008. The same formula. So the formula doesn't change because that's a general approach for calculation of inflation rate. And then substitute the numbers and the very simple calculations allow us to get the result. So the inflation rate for the next years is 17.78%. So if we round up, it's about 18%. Now compare 24% and 18%. That's interesting that time to time in economy, the processes that's strictly opposite to inflation may occur. And this process is known in economics like deflation process. Okay. We can calculate the inflation rate as we indicated above in terms of producer's price index, or in other words, that's the wholesale price index. So we have to distinguish between the wholesale prices and retail prices. That's why what we have to know about the wholesale price index. Firstly, That is the price of representative basket of wholesale goods. As I mentioned before, sometimes you can be faced with the other term like producer's price index. You can see the example of the country chosen, like for example, the India. That's a hypothetical example. Look, compared with 1993 and 94 years, the advanced base in 2011 and 2012. So if in 1994 the WPI or PPI includes about 435 items, different names of the different goods and services. So in 2012 and the number of items increased till 676 different names of goods and services. Okay, so the calculation actually doesn't change because the general line, the general approach is the same. So you need to find out the percentage change. And the last method, or maybe the third type of price indexes that we can use for counting the inflation rate, is using the GNP, or sometimes the GDP deflator. So GDP deflator or GNP deflator, that's actually approximately very close values, shows a ratio of nominal GNP during the year to the real level of GNP, gross national product, of that current year. So GNP or GDP deflator is ratio of nominal GNP, or in some countries you can use the GDP, to the value of real GNP. So that's the definition that you can use in order to clarify the meaning of gross national product, if you forgot, of course. So the gross national product, that's the broad measure of nations' total economic activity. Normally, that's the value of all finished goods and services that the national economy produces during 1 year, using by all available resources. Okay, so that's the another example. Imagine that in some hypothetical country, the amount of nominal GNP is, in terms of some hypothetical currency, is 1,740.2 thousand, and the amount of real GDP is at the level of 1,136.9 thousand. So how to find out the GDP deflator? So you need to divide these two numbers and the result multiplied by 100. So probably the calculations allow to assert that this data, this index, is about 153. Now, the same calculations we can do for the next year. If amount of nominal GDP, say, increased till 1,819,000, and you have the value of the previous real GDP. So by finding the ratio between the current nominal GNP value, I mean 1,819, to the real versions of, because we use this year like the base year, so 1,136.9, and result multiplied by 100. So the new figure is 160. So the next step, that's very, very important to understand, because namely the result of this third step of calculations will use like the rate of inflation. That's the percentage change in GDP deflator, GNP deflator, because that percentage change will clarify the real rate of inflation in our hypothetical country. So we need to find the difference between the value of GNP deflator 160 and the previous figure 153 and divide this by 153. That's the base year GDP deflator. So the result is multiplied by 100%. And finally, the inflation rate in the country is 4.6% or about 5%. And because we have the information about the percentages of inflation rate and how we have to classify the inflation type in accordance to inflation rate, we may assert that this in this hypothetical country for 2002 and 2001, for these years, the inflation was creeping inflation. And that's positive because the creeping inflation frequently encourages producers to increase supply of goods and services, and in turn is evaluated like some positive effect over the national economy. So actually that's everything concerning the methods of calculating the inflation rates by using the different price indexes. So I would like to remind you, so we started with calculating the consumer price index because actually we can do this in two different methods to measure inflation. So the first global general method is using the price index numbers. Price index in turn implies two approaches: consumer price index and wholesale price index, or in other words, producer's price index. And the second very useful approach is counting the inflation rate in terms of GDP deflator. Okay, so that's everything for today concerning the measuring of inflation, but I would like to continue the lesson in terms of types of inflation. I would like to develop this approach because originally we discussed several types of inflation in terms of inflation rate, so in terms of percentages. So we assert, okay, 2, 3, 5% till 10% inflation rate, that's normal, creeping or weak inflation. Okay, if inflation rate exceeds 10%, I mean the annual inflation rate, increase 10%, and the changes among 20% and 200%, okay, that's very bad. That's running and even the global inflation. And if the inflation rate exceeds 1,000%, that's awful situation because in this case, we normally are faced with very hard situation in economy known like hyperinflation. The hyperinflation implies that the people try immediately leave the paper money because the purchasing power of money declines so fast that people try immediately compensate the paper money by real commodities. That's why they try to buy more goods and services. They lower their savings. They don't want to use paper money at least. And frequently this situation leads to natural methods of organizing the business, of developing the households, and even the barter in terms of business negotiations. Well, the inflation, unfortunately, is sometimes very harmful because the consumers suffer from extremely great rate of inflation, and they try to lower their savings. They want to increase consumption, and this overconsumption in terms frequently leads to new level and even higher level of inflation. And on the other side, the banking sector also suffers from extremely rapid rate of inflation because they cannot operate their policy concern the offering the different loans to entrepreneurs. While they may offer the loan and receive in turn the money with very lower purchasing power, very cheap money. Well, that's why when we discuss inflation, of course, we have to understand that that's very hard process. Well, from one side, it's very normal for majority of national economies. On the other side, it's very harmful and wasteful for consumers, for producers, for banks, and for other major economic agents. Okay, so I see now that my computer time indicates that I have very few minutes to the end of my lesson. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So you may write me by chat or just immediately put my questions. Okay. Do you have any questions? Would you like to put me some questions or not? If not, so let me say you have a good day. Bye-bye. See you next week.